Hey, welcome back to the Bible reading plan overview. This is week number 6, and we are going through Exodus. We're making a lot of progress, moving really fast through the Bible, and I'm excited. I pray that your faith is being encouraged and you're being blessed through it all. Last week, we looked at the children of Israel and Moses as they were making their way out of Israel. We looked at the 10 plagues, and then we also saw the culmination of all of it when God opened the Red Sea, children of Israel went through, and then ultimately it closed on Pharaoh and his army, giving the children of Israel victory in this really battle that they were in. And then we are looking this week about the covenant that God makes with Israel and really the solidification of it. And really, we're going to be looking at the terms of it. And so we'll look at a couple different things. We'll look at a covenant. We'll look at why God gave so many laws to Israel. And then we'll look at the different types of laws. And then we'll conclude it all with God's promise to fulfill his covenant and to fulfill his end of the deal. And we'll look at that in chapter 30 or 23. And so really it starts out in Genesis chapter number 20. A cool thing here is, remember when Moses met God in the burning bush? One of the things he says was a token that God would give Moses is that Moses was to bring the children of Israel, to lead them back to this place. And really, God was the one that led the children of Israel back to the same mountain that God met Moses at. Because remember, the pillar of fire and smoke was the thing that was leading the children of Israel, which was God. We see this word covenant used, and we use this word a lot. And these next couple of verses and chapters are really important for our understanding of the rest of the Old Testament and why God brings judgment later. But it also plays a big role in the New Testament because these words are used a lot. They use the word covenant, the old covenant, the law, as it is written. Jesus says that a lot, and he's referring back to sometimes this moment or other moments in the Old Testament. So this is a really important passage, and it lays a lot of groundwork for what's to come. But the question is this: what is a covenant? A simple way to think of a covenant is an agreement or promise. In modern terms, we have covenants with a spouse. So when we get married, it's the marital covenant. We go to the altar, we have a ceremony, and we make an agreement, right? That of course we say the vows, and usually the traditional vows are something like in sickness and in death, and for richer or for poorer, till death do us part, right? We go through the vows, and we're making an agreement. We're making a promise to stay with each other through any circumstance and season of life. That's the agreement. That's the promise. Sort of like that, this is what's happening in this passage. God is going to lay out the foundation and the terms of this covenant with the children of Israel. Hey, if you're going to be my people, this is what it's going to take. This is what it's going to cost you. Do you agree to it? And this is what I will do in return. So what we see in chapter 20 is really the laying out of the first 10 commandments. Some of the most important ones. We see that 5 are upward, vertical, meaning that 5 are really between people and God. And then 5 are horizontal, meaning that they're typically between people to other people and their neighbors. Now, a couple of things. One, we understand that when these are broken, they're all broken, and we sin first and foremost against God. But some of them, for instance, let's read chapter 20, some parts of it. The beginning says, "And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that which is in the water under the earth." And so he starts it out by saying, hey, there's no other gods. And then he says, don't make any graven images. Don't take the Lord thy God's name in vain, which doesn't mean just speaking his name in vain, though that's part of it. But it's about living a lifestyle that is in vain. Because if you're going to be called the people of God, then you ought to act like it. So those are some of the parts. There's an important distinction that we need to make here. And it's this. This passage is to the children of Israel. He's writing this to the children of Israel, not to the church, not to us. And so hold that thought, because we're going to come back to that when we understand the different types of laws. So why does God need to give the children of Israel all these laws? We have the 10 Commandments here, but in the law, meaning he goes over laws in Exodus, there are laws in Deuteronomy, there's laws in Leviticus and in Numbers. There are 619 different laws regarding different things about how the children of Israel are supposed to live, how they're to worship, how they're supposed to function as a society. Right? They have all of these laws, but why do they need all of these laws? Well, if we remember, the children of Israel had spent 400 years in Egypt. Now, I'm sure they tried to stay away from the idolatry and the paganism and the customs of Egypt, but over the span of 400 years, a lot of that culture, a lot of that influence had probably wore off on them. And remember, they had never really been a nation before this. They'd really been nomads, right? Until they landed in the area of Goshen, and even there, they were just kind of pilgrims. They were there to stay. And so, think of it like this. Maybe you've moved from somewhere, let's say you lived in the north and you moved to the south. And of course, the southerners have a different way of pronouncing things. I forget what that's called, but they have a way of saying things. And so if you spent 30 to 40 years in the south, you would start to pick up on some of the ways that they say things. You would start to pick up on some of their mannerisms that they have. Just spending time in different regions or places, you begin to naturally pick up customs. And so just like that, the children of Israel had began to pick up customs of the Egyptians. And God wanted his people to be a peculiar people. Even as we're reading, you'll see that he tells them this, that I want you to be a special, a different kind of people among all the other nations. And the children of Israel were supposed to be a light. They were supposed to be different. Very similarly to how us Christians are supposed to be. We should be a light. We should be different than the culture and the people around us. That was the plan for Israel. They were supposed to be different. And the laws were kind of like a constitution. This is how you're supposed to live. This is how you're supposed to be governed. This is how you're supposed to be separate or holy from everything else. And this is how I desire to be worshiped. They're putting rules and regulations on how they are supposed to function as a people. Because remember, they had never been a nation up until this point. They don't have a lot of laws up until this point. They had circumcision, which they were supposed to do. And now they had Passover. But there were other things that God was going to add on top of this to keep them within his will and to be his people. And remember, a lot of the laws and a lot of the symbols that they're going to be doing, the feasts that they're going to be having, are shadows of the coming Christ, are for them to remember and look forward to what God is going to do one day. So 619 different laws. They're really broken down into 3 different categories. We understand what the covenant is. 619 laws broken into 3 categories. Moral laws, ceremonial laws, and civil laws. Let's work backward. Ceremonial laws or civil laws are how they are to operate as a society, civilly. Some of it had to do with tithes and regulations. Some of it had to do with how they're to treat their neighbors, how they're to deal with slavery in their culture. Some of it was how they should be governed. Like, all of these things are how they are to operate as a civilization, as a nation. Again, part of it had to do with letting land rest or things like that. And then you have the ceremonial law, which part of the ceremonial law involves tithing too. Part of the tithe was for land and functioning as a society and feast and things like that, which Then there was a tithe, which was 10%, which was for the operation of the temple, for some of the feasts, things like that. But then remember, the civil law also had different kind of tithes as well. But in the ceremonial law, this is more of how you are to sacrifice and how you are to make a distinction between whether you are clean or unclean. So the ceremonial laws is like this. How do you sacrifice appropriately that's pleasing to God? Because God wants certain sacrifices, and so he makes rules and regulations for those things. How are the priests to operate? What are they to wear? How are they to be ceremonially clean? In a lot of different things like that. Like if you touch a dead animal, you're unclean, and they give the steps in order of how do you be clean after you've encountered something like that. The last one, and probably one of the biggest ones, is the moral law. These are things like don't murder, don't steal, don't take the Lord's name in vain. Like these are moral laws. Here's the important distinction. Like I said earlier, and I said hold on to it. These laws, this chapter, this covenant is with the children of Israel, not with all mankind. And so we have to use wisdom, and we have to be discerning when we're looking at these scriptures. Meaning this, the moral law is for all people at all times. It's always been wrong to murder and to steal and to lie. It's always been wrong because that's a moral thing. But some things, like don't eat shellfish, don't wear 2 types of clothes, don't touch this dead animal or you're unclean. Like those things are ceremonial and civil laws. They're not moral. And so they don't apply to us. And so when we're reading this, we need to use some discernment and discretion when we're reading this, that not all of this applies to us. He's talking to Israel. He's not talking to Gentiles. He's not talking to the church. He's not talking to outside nations. He's talking to Israel. Now, when we're reading this, we can read it and understand what moral laws are, things that apply to all people at all times. And we can take those things and apply them to our lives that we live now. Again, it's always wrong to murder. Later in Leviticus, it talks about homosexuality. It's always been wrong. And so we need to look at this and use our discretion as we're reading through, understanding that not all of this applies to us because this was written to the Israelites. And so God lays the ground rules of if you're going to be my people, then this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to take. This is what I want my people to be like. And so he lays those ground rules. And then, of course, in chapter 24, verse 3 says, and Moses came and told all the people all the words of the Lord and the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord hath said, we will do. And so all the people say, yes, we will obey this command. We agree to the covenant. We agree to the deal. And then Moses performs the sacrifice and then sprinkles the blood on the people, and it's just it's the sealing of the covenant, of the agreement that the people make with the Lord. But as we're looking at this and as we're going forward in the scriptures, what we'll see is this: God is sending them to the promised land, and as he's sending them there, we're going to see some wavering, where they begin to doubt, and they really begin to already mess this covenant up. They already begin to break the deal, the promise they made. Here they're saying, yeah, we will do it, and then just in a little while we'll see that they don't quite follow through. But I love this passage here because it's showing that God is about to call them to do something that's scary, that's fearful, going into the land and taking the land. Man, that's a big deal. Remember, they had been slaves and in bondage for 400 years. What do they know about war? What do they know about fighting and conquering land? It could be a scary and fearful thing going. And remember, there's giants in the land. But look at chapter 23, verse 23. It says, for mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee unto the Aramites, Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Jump down to 25. And ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. There shall nothing be cast from their young, nor barren in the land, and the number of thy days I will fulfill. I will send my fear before thee. Later it says that I will make all thine enemies turn their backs unto thee. Verse 28, and I will send hornets before thee. And verse 29, and I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land be desolate and the beasts of the wild field multiply against thee. But by little and little I will drive them out. Do you notice what he says? I will. I will. I'm sending you there, but I'm going to be the one to perform this. I'm going to be the one to do this. Hey, God was the one to destroy Pharaoh's army. It wasn't Israel. God was the one that freed them. It was God that's doing this, and it's God that's going to perform all this. He just wanted his people to be faithful, to believe his promises. And again, he even gives, not only does he give that he's going to do it, he gives how he's going to do it, but then also he says this, that it's going to be little by little. He gives them a time frame. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take time, but I'm going to do this little by little. Just have faith and obey. And that was the deal. And so God makes a covenant, of course, and like we said, in 24, he seals the covenant with them through this sacrifice and Moses and the sprinkling of the blood. And this is all really important. Okay, so don't skip over this. The covenant that happens in this moment will play out for the rest of the Bible, and we will see the implications of it. And then later we'll see what happens when they completely fail this covenant. And that later we'll see that God sends them into captivity later because they break the covenant. So I hope, I know this is a long one, but we're covering a lot, and it's so important. And so I hope it blessed you, and I hope you got a good overview of what we're talking about this week.